Hello. If you're up this late, you're probably stressing about 103 graded assignment for algebra review, and it is your first pre-calculus assignment, but it's really just a review of the algebra that you've had previously. Some of us are overthinking it, and I wanted to give you a little help. Here's number one. In number one, you were given two functions that describe the behavior over two particular domains. The first domain is, or the first interval is from -3 to 0. And so we're going to be looking at the interval just here from 0 to -3. Okay? So we need to know what's going on at those intervals. The easiest way to know what's going on at those intervals is to plug in and find the value. Well, at -3, if we plug in, that'll be in the first equation. That's -3 times 3 is 9, or -9, plus 5 is -4. So that means that my coordinate point is -3, -4. I do a closed circle at this point because it is included. At 0, if I were to plug in 0 for x, I would get 5. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay? And so I know that I can go ahead and connect this. Now I'm done with that range, and I'm going to look at the interval greater than 0, but notice it doesn't have an equals to sign under it, so I do not include it. So whatever I get here for the second one has to start with an open circle. So at 0 on that interval, x squared minus 3, if I plug in 0 for x squared, then -3 is my p of x, or y value. If I plug in 1, that's 1 squared minus 3, which is -2. If I plug in 2, that's 4 minus 3, which is 1. I can very easily, starting at 0, -3, go ahead with my open circle here. Now, the 0 is not included, but everything else is. So I've taken care of the first point. At 1, -2, that's going to be just a closed circle. And at 2, 1. If you want to go a little further, you can go in for 3. 3 squared is 9, minus 3 is 6. And so that would be 3, 6. And you can see, you already should know that this is a quadratic, but you should see that curve forming. And we're going to go ahead and put that arrow on the end because it is an unbounded interval. It goes on to positive infinity. All right, that's the graphing part of it. Now, the other part of it is to find the values. Well, at 1, we are going to use the second equation, and we will get -2. For 10, again, we'll use the second equation. So that'll be 100 minus 3, or 97. For 5, again, we're going to use that second equation. It's going to be 25 minus 3, or 22. And for -6, -6 is not greater than 0, but it is also not between -3 and 0. Therefore, this is undefined. You can't do it because it's not defined on that interval. All right, here's another one, and in this case, we are being asked to determine the function itself, which just means that we want to get the equation of the line, and we're going to determine the domain or the interval over which that line is defined. So let's look at the easiest part first. We have a closed circle here at -2, 2, and then a constant function at y equals 2. So this one is going to be f of x, or y equals -2. And it's going to be for all values of x greater than or equal to -2. So I know in class I had you do the interval including infinity, but this is another way to write it. Okay? And for the other one, we have an open circle here at -2. So this one is going to be x less than -2. Notice this one doesn't include the -2. All right, and now we just have to find that equation. So we need to find the slope here. This is an increasing slope. It seems to be a slope of 1. Knowing that our slope is 1, we can choose a point, and I just chose this point here, -4, 1, and we can plug in the x and y values for that point into our slope-intercept form, and plugging in the values we have, 1 for y, 1 for slope, and -4 for x. That only leaves one unknown, which will give me the intercept. And when I solve it, the intercept is 5. So that means this equation is x plus 5. So in essence, you just imagine that that line is continuous, and then you find the equation of that line. Okay? Finally, several of you asked about the ability to write in Adobe. Well, on this particular assignment, it's really not going to be helpful since you have to graph. You also are going to need to show me those graphs by hand. But if you ever get into Adobe and see this button, fill and sign, you do have options there to add text, and you can type in Adobe that way. But you cannot necessarily draw in it, what you would need to do. If you wanted to cut the graphs and put them in something like Paint, a program like Paint, then you could draw in it that way and just attach that into a Word document just to assist you. All right, guys, just a few tips. Make sure you're always using Firefox, and go ahead, if you listen to the end of this, you can turn in your assignment by Friday. So you got a couple of extra days. Thanks so much.